Thank you very much. Hi guys, like I said, I'm Louis Melligue. I'm here to chat to you about how you can leverage bought media and add it to your current kind of digital marketing strategies. We've got a really packed agenda this weekend, and there's loads of really fantastic speakers, but the majority of them are going to be speaking to you about your SEO strategies and how you can turbocharge your link building, whereas bought media often kind of gets left at the wayside because it's so expensive. So I just want to chat about a couple of strategies that we use in order to kind of circumnavigate these problems. So a little bit about me. I've been in performance media for about 5 years. I've worked at some of the biggest sort of social media agencies in the UK. But currently I work for Illuminate, and our specialisms are sort of PPC and SEO. But some of our USPs are we have a lot of proprietary technology, including a native advertising platform. So that's something I really want to focus on today, how you can use kind of emerging paid media channels in order to complement your current strategies. So I've broken the talk down today into 4 separate stages. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the marketplace of bought media, where it's at the moment. And then I'm going to focus on some native strategies that you can use. What we do in the sort of PPC optimization. I'm not going to bore you with kind of how we set up an AdWords account, but just some of the kind of tricks of the trade that we use at the moment to get around some of the problems that people are seeing. And then I just want to touch on a few things that we're seeing that are going to be growing over the next couple of years, and how you can use the previous kind of techniques in different channels to expand your affiliate networks. So everybody knows the main kind of problem with bought media at the moment is the cost associated to it. So it's making people kind of lean more towards the earned and owned media sections, just because they can control the cost that they're spending on each of these strategies. But the other problem is when we try and tell people to look into more emerging channels, like move away from PPC perhaps, it's a really confusing and complicated landscape. There's a million different technology platforms out there, all offering different things. So it's very hard to know who to partner with or how to get value out of that partnership. And what we're really seeing, especially some of the top sort of operators in the UK, there's an inherent distrust of emerging platforms. That they, as you can see from the kind of stats here, they think it's going to be too expensive before they've even tried it. It's too complicated, and they just don't know how to kind of get in there. But what that does is actually open up quite a nice opportunity for everyone else, because before these platforms get too competitive, there's a massive space that you can kind of go into and make it your own. So if we just talk about native for a moment, and I don't know if anyone here is already familiar with kind of native programmatic advertising, but it's basically the evolution of display. So where display used to be really intrusive adverts to get horrible click-through rates, horrible engagement, native actually puts these adverts in relevant context on these publisher sites. So instead of being an intrusive pop-up, it will look like an article on this actual publisher site. And that way, users are more engaged, they're more trusting, and they're more likely to actually click through on your advert. And that way, you can get some really great engagement through. Now, native started as just a way to kind of put your content on a publisher's website, but it's rapidly evolving. So this time last year, we could only really target different types of content. So for example, you could get an advert placed on the sports section of the Daily Mail. But now we can add in so many different data streams that you can get your advert in the sports section of the Daily Mail, geo-targeted to someone once you've uploaded the kind of TV listings and you know that they're watching, for example, the London Derby. But you can see that they're dual screening, they're browsing the Daily Mail. You can serve up a relevant piece of content talking about a successful accumulator story or something like that and get them straight to your website. So what we're able to do is not only test the different strategies, we can test the different formats available as well. So for here, for example, not only now are you getting the right advert in front of the right person at the right time, but it's also different formats that have different kind of click-through rates depending on which kind of strategy you're using. So we can pull the cool, innovative stuff that we're getting from Facebook, and we can plug that straight into direct publishers such as the Daily Mail. One of the other limiting factors before, so a year ago, for example, the inventory was actually very limited. But now every day, more and more top-tier publishers are kind of opening up their programmatic inventory to native and using something like header bidding, for example. This is a brand new kind of innovation where now everybody can have access to the inventory on these top publishers. So sites like the Daily Mail and the Telegraph and things like that, you can get your content on there for a tenth of the price that it would cost for a direct buy. Here's a quick good example. One of our sort of top operators recently was really struggling in the PPC market space. So we offered them native as kind of a viable alternative to their direct response adverts. just by scaling up the impressions at a really cheap cost per click, we managed to dramatically drop their cost per conversion, and it's been a really, really successful channel for them. But one of the other strategies you can do, because it may not always work from a direct response kind of angle if you're not a massive operator and you haven't got that brand name, you can take the content that you're pushing out there for SEO and that you're trying to get links back for, and you can kind of amplify the content that you already have. So if you have a really cool infographic, for example, you can plug that into some of the top tier publishers, get massive scale at really cheap cost per click. And it gives you amazing brand awareness. So this is another one, kind of at the end of last year, we took some really cool content that one of our affiliate networks was using, sprayed it around the web, and we massively increased the clicks they were seeing per day. There was a 64% increase. So it can be a really powerful tool for a few different strategies, not just direct response. And so I just want to also chat about a couple of the ways that we've been optimizing our PPC campaigns to kind of get around the typical very expensive kind of cost per clicks, the fact that the big operators are just like broad matching the generic terms and pumping loads of cash in there, so it's really hard to get a look in. And with the recent legislation changes as well, there's a really tight control over what you can actually put in your ad copy. So a few of the ways we've been kind of getting around this are using a platform, again, like Native or something else where you can get a lot of scale at a really cheap cost per click, driving all of that really engaged traffic to your website, and then you drop cookies on them using something like Google RLSA, and then that gives you the ability to just target those through Google Adwords, and you can then cut out some of those bigger operators, and you can actually get some of those generic keywords. You can target those for a much cheaper cost per click. So you can use the same sort of strategies as the big operators, but for a much cheaper sort of price. And the other thing we always recommend doing is sort of staying on top of the current trends. So a week or two ago, as an example, YouTube rolled out a feature where you can use people's search history through Google to target them through YouTube. So what we've been doing with a couple of our affiliate networks over the last couple of weeks is working on getting their video assets onto YouTube. And this was previously just for the bigger operators, sort of brand engagement, and you could not really get too much direct response from it. But if you can target people that, say, have been looking at tennis player performance of the last couple of weeks, and you know that they've been searching for that, then you can sort of roll out some really, really targeted adverts to them through YouTube. And we've already been seeing some brilliant engagement coming through on a channel that was typically not viable to them, just because we've been abreast of the new features that are out there. And I also just wanted to highlight that if you get your basics right with PPC, there's still like massive opportunity out there to use it in a traditional way. For example, if you've got the right sort of toolkit, if you're using all the sort of search metrics, RS and things to scrape the long tail keywords, there's still massive opportunity out there as long as you're focusing on the kind of the keywords with the right search intent. I just wanted to also touch on what we're seeing currently coming out, just to give you some tips on what might be useful for the future. So the IAB have recently standardized the programmatic audio format, which means that in the same way that you can programmatically plug in display adverts across the web, you can now programmatically plug in your audio adverts across things like Spotify. And using their demographic information, you can, for example, get a really nice, cheap 30-second advert on Spotify, only directed to the sort of people that you know are betting on certain types of games, things like that. So it can be a really, really targeted way of going in, and it's something that wasn't really around before. We've also been doing some TV campaigns, so where there used to be sort of 5 channels, and now there's about 4,000, with internet service providers providing TV nowadays. The line between digital and TV is becoming more and more blurry. So what we found is using something like Sky AdSmart, you can get that same video content that I was talking about, for example, for a YouTube pre-roll, onto really niche late-night ad slots for not a lot of money at all. And you can make sure that none of that is being wasted and it's only being seen by relevant members of your audience. And lastly, I just wanted to use a quick example of some other formats that people don't often talk about. So programmatic out-of-home is something that's becoming really quite big at the moment, where you can take the strategies you were using for programmatic online, and you can take that to kind of out-of-home formats. So for example, if you wanted to stand here at the LAC, but you couldn't afford it, but you know you wanted to get your brand in front of everybody here, you can geo-target all the after parties, for example, and make sure that your adverts are showing up on the sort of screens in the urinals or at the bus stops near the after parties. And we did that for a couple of conferences late last year and managed to get some brands out there that just couldn't be in that space. But we managed to get really successful campaigns for making sure like over half of the sort of people there were actually seeing their brand and getting engaged with them. So that's about everything I kind of wanted to chat to you today. So thank you very much for coming and speaking to me. And open up the floor to any questions.
Do you have any questions on the floor at all? Just need to raise your hand if you have any. I'd like to talk about budget. I mean, what sort of budgets, affiliates looking at doing this? What do they, where does this start from? I mean, I know you're going to say we can do something fitted to their needs, but what kind of investment do they need to make in this?
Yeah, I mean, depends on which channels, obviously, and what they have previous experience using. But we've been running campaigns from anything from less than £1,000 a month on native and finding really good ways to kind of bolster the top of the funnel market for them so they can go back at them at RLSA, up to anything up to £30,000-40,000 a month. So it really is a really, really scalable industry. So I know it's not a perfect answer, but like you said, there's something for everyone. Okay.
I guess also from the operator side as well. I mean, this obviously, how does this change the native advertising? How does this change what the operators need to provide with affiliates and how they need to work with them? Do they need to change their approach at all, or is it just something that they can kind of add on?
So we found in terms of the approach, there's a lot of kind of test and learn as they go on, but they can use like strategies that are using across all other digital channels. It's quite relevant. You can take the existing assets, you can take the existing kind of ad copy from PPC and plug that straight into native advertising, or you can take relevant sections from your SEO strategies. So you can take content that you're seeding out for SEO, put that on your site and get people coming back to that. So you can basically take any kind of strategies you're already using and plug it directly into native.
Okay. And there is obviously some restricted PPC in particular markets. I mean, are you mainly focused on the UK at the moment, I imagine? Are there other markets as well? What's the situation with PPC and other markets at the moment across Europe?
Yeah, so we're focused mainly on the UK, but we have quite strong reach in we've got a few affiliates in Germany and places like that where the same sort of strategies are working. It's just the native coverage isn't quite as high, so we've got to focus more on the kind of PPC side of things for them. But it's something that's growing all the time. So by the end of the year, I'd imagine it would be just as strong in kind of Germany as it is in the UK.
Okay. Feel free, if anybody has a question, to put their hand up at all. Okay. Got one there. Do you mind just introducing yourself?
Just an affiliate. So we mostly work in sort of European markets and closing markets around the world and whatever. But you say, with regards to the native advertising, are you doing much, and are people doing much around Europe?
Yeah, yes. So like I said, the UK market is probably the strongest at the moment in terms of the percentage of publishers out there that are actually opening up their inventory to native. But following that, kind of France and Germany are really strong as well, and we're seeing all the other markets emerging. So maybe they're a couple of years behind.
How would we, if we wanted to use native marketing, say in Europe, in Spain, in France, wherever, how would we plug into that?
Yeah, so you just need to contact like a native DSP. There's quite a few of them out there, and just sort of see what they're offering. And you can ask them specifically about their coverage in the particular markets that you want to ask, and they'll be able to tell you, yes, we can cover kind of 80% of the inventory available in Germany, for example, if that's somewhere where you're looking. So it's just about kind of speaking to a few different demand-side platforms, and then they can kind of take it from there. They'll take your content or creative and plug it into these native platforms for you. So it's all kind of done by the DSPs. There's not too much work involved for yourself.
Thank you.
Okay. Got another one there.
Hello.
Hey.
It can be, Google is quite strict on gambling-related ads in Google Adwords. And it can be difficult to push particular ads into Google. Do you have any tips or tricks how do you, that helps you, to push more gambling-related content through AdWords?
Yeah, so that is one of obviously the main problems at the moment with sort of legislation changes and things like that. So what we're trying to find, or what we're finding, is if you use other ways of kind of getting that audience to your website in the first place, then when you use sort of remarketing in Google, for example, you already know that the audience that you're looking for. So your ad format, your ad copy doesn't have to be quite as salesy. It doesn't have to have the same strong messages at all to get them through. So you're not actually opening up to as broad an audience. You've already kind of done that part by getting them to your website. So then when you're going back and marketing on Google, you can have a much softer message and you can get around some of those guidelines that Google has. That's the kind of best strategy we're seeing at the moment.
Okay, any more? Okay. So, hello? We've got a question on the back there. Thank you. From the audience. What's your view on bidding on a competitor's brand name or trademark?
As long as it's within kind of the Google's guidelines, so you're not explicitly kind of maybe putting their name in and you're being a bit clever about it, I don't see a major problem with it. We've seen some fairly good results from kind of competitive bidding in the past, but then you've got to be careful as well. We've also had results where we've kind of annoyed certain bigger operators and got into kind of a bit of a bidding war there. And if they've got the money, the financial backing to kind of outcompete with you, they can really ruin some of your campaigns by doing the same thing back to you. So I'd say it's just a case of being very careful who you do it to, and obviously careful how you do it so you're not infringing on Google's guidelines.
But Google, it's within Google guidelines to do that, right? It's just, I mean, as far as the operators are concerned, I mean, I remember when this was a bit of an issue a few years ago, and some operators came out and said they were very happy for affiliates to do it, and other ones were like, in no way. Is that still the way it works? I mean, maybe maybe someone in the audience might.
What we found is bidding on competitors' brand terms is fine,
Yeah.
but it's if you put their actual name in the ad copy, for example, they can then get that removed by Google. Because you're infringing on their actual brand name. But if you're kind of clever about it, you might be able to put in something that looks like their brand name or like a play on words around it, and you can still get the same sort of click-throughs that you would see if you were actually bidding on a brand name without actually going outside of Google's guidelines. So you just got to be a bit clever about how you do it.
Okay. Right, do we have any more questions? Okay. I've kind of come to the end of mine as well.
No worries.
Louis, you can will obviously be sticking around afterwards if you want to come and have a bit more chat and exchange cards. Thanks very much, Louis. That was excellent.
No worries. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming, everyone. Cheers.